Topic 1: Systems and Models. In environmental systems and societies, understanding systems and models helps us explain how the natural world and human societies interact. Throughout this topic, we will explore key concepts such as energy flow, matter cycling, interactions, feedback mechanisms, sustainability, and human systems. Together, these concepts provide a framework for understanding environmental challenges and developing sustainable solutions for the future. Learning objectives. By the end of this topic, students should be able to define systems and models and explain how these tools help us understand complex environmental processes and interactions. They should be able to identify the major components of a system, including living and non-living elements, and describe how these components are connected. Students will also learn to distinguish between open and closed systems and apply these concepts to real-world examples. For instance, a forest ecosystem exchanges both matter and energy with its surroundings, whereas Earth is often considered a closed system for matter. Another important objective is to explain inputs, outputs, storages, and flows within environmental systems. Examples include sunlight entering a system as an input, nutrients being stored in soil, and energy flowing through food chains. Students should further understand positive and negative feedback mechanisms and evaluate how they influence system stability and change. For example, melting ice can accelerate warming through positive feedback, while predator-prey interactions often help maintain ecological balance through negative feedback. Finally, students should be able to use models and diagrams to analyze environmental systems, make predictions, and support informed environmental decisions. Together, these skills provide a strong foundation for understanding environmental challenges and developing sustainable solutions. Systems and models. In environmental systems and societies, systems help us understand how different parts of the environment interact, while models provide simplified representations that help explain, analyze, and predict those interactions. A system is a set of interconnected components working together as a whole. Examples include ecosystems, where living organisms interact with their physical environment, climate systems, involving the atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere, socio-environmental systems, where people, economies, and nature interact, and resource systems that manage renewable and non-renewable resources. Models are tools used to study these complex systems. Conceptual models use diagrams and flowcharts to show relationships. Mathematical models use equations to predict outcomes such as population growth or climate change. Computer models simulate complex environmental processes, while physical models provide scaled representations for observation and testing. By combining systems thinking with models, we can better understand environmental complexity, evaluate alternative scenarios, and make informed decisions that support sustainability and responsible resource management. What is a system? A system is defined as a set of interrelated components working together as a whole. In environmental science, systems help us understand how different parts of nature are connected and function together. Every system consists of 4 key elements. First are components, which are the individual parts of the system. In a forest ecosystem, these include trees, animals, water, soil, sunlight, air, and microorganisms. Second are interactions, which describe how components influence one another. For example, plants produce food and oxygen through photosynthesis, while animals depend on plants for food and habitat. Third are processes, the activities and changes that occur within the system. Examples include photosynthesis, respiration, decomposition, nutrient cycling, and the movement of water through the water cycle. Fourth are boundaries, which separate the system from its surroundings. In this example, the forest ecosystem is considered the system within a defined boundary. When components interact through processes within a boundary, the system functions as an integrated whole, maintaining balance and supporting life. Components of a system. Every system is made up of four main components that work together to maintain structure and function. First are inputs, which are resources entering the system. In a forest ecosystem, examples include sunlight as an energy source, water from rainfall, nutrients from the soil, and information such as environmental signals that influence organism behavior. Second are processes or flows, which involve the movement or transformation of matter and energy within the system. Examples include photosynthesis, where plants convert sunlight into chemical energy, respiration, where organisms release energy, and evaporation, which transfers water into the atmosphere. Third are outputs, the products that leave the system. A forest releases oxygen during photosynthesis, heat through energy transfer, and organic waste materials through decomposition and biological activity. Fourth are storages, where matter or energy is held within the system. Biomass stored in trees, groundwater stored beneath the soil, and carbon stored in vegetation are important examples. These components are closely interconnected. A change in rainfall, for instance, affects water storage, influences ecological processes, and ultimately alters the outputs produced by the ecosystem. Understanding these relationships helps us analyze how environmental systems function and respond to change. Interactions in a system. Components of a system do not operate independently. They are connected through continuous exchanges of energy, matter, and information, creating a dynamic and interdependent environmental system. At the center is the environmental system, which interacts with the atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, biosphere, and human systems. For example, the atmosphere exchanges gases such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen with living organisms. The hydrosphere interacts through evaporation, precipitation, and water movement. The lithosphere supplies nutrients through weathering and erosion, while human systems provide resources but also generate waste and emissions that influence environmental conditions. Energy interactions show how energy flows in one direction through a system. Sunlight is captured by plants during photosynthesis, transferred to animals through feeding relationships, and eventually lost as heat. For example, sunlight supports grass growth, which feeds deer and other herbivores. Matter interactions involve the cycling and recycling of materials. Water, nutrients, and carbon move continuously between soil, plants, animals, decomposers, and the atmosphere. A good example is the nutrient cycle, where dead organic matter is decomposed and returned to the soil for plant uptake. Information interactions occur when signals trigger responses within a system. Changes in temperature, rainfall, or resource availability influence the behavior of plants, animals, and entire ecosystems. For instance, drought conditions can stress plants, leading to animal migration and broader ecosystem changes. Understanding these interactions helps explain why a change in one component can affect many others throughout the system. System boundaries. A system boundary is the limit that separates a system from its surroundings. It helps us define what is included in the study and what remains outside. In the example shown, the dotted line around the forest ecosystem represents the boundary, while everything beyond it forms the surroundings. Boundaries are important because they allow us to focus on the interactions occurring within a specific system. For example, when studying a forest ecosystem, we may include trees, animals, soil, water, and microorganisms inside the boundary while excluding nearby urban areas. Boundaries can be classified into three main types. Natural boundaries are formed by nature, such as mountain ranges, rivers, watersheds, or coastlines. These features naturally separate one ecosystem from another. Artificial boundaries are created by humans, such as fences, roads, city limits, or protected area borders, often for management or administrative purposes. Boundaries can also be described as open or closed. Open boundaries allow the exchange of matter, energy, and information. Most ecosystems are open because sunlight, water, nutrients, organisms, and information constantly move across them. Closed boundaries allow little or no exchange, although completely closed systems are extremely rare in nature. Understanding boundaries helps scientists define study areas, track flows and interactions, and analyze environmental systems more effectively. Processes in a system. Processes are the mechanisms that allow a system to function by transferring energy, cycling matter, and transmitting information between components. At the center is the environmental system, which continuously interacts with the atmosphere, lithosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, and human systems. The atmosphere exchanges gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, as well as heat and water vapor. The lithosphere supplies minerals and nutrients through weathering and erosion. The hydrosphere contributes water through precipitation, runoff, infiltration, and evaporation. The biosphere transfers energy through food chains and recycles matter through decomposition. Human systems both depend on ecosystem services and influence the environment through resource use, land use change, emissions, and waste generation. Three important categories of processes are highlighted. Energy processes involve the one-way flow of energy. Solar energy is captured by plants through photosynthesis, transferred to herbivores and carnivores through feeding relationships, and ultimately lost as heat. For example, sunlight supports grass growth, which feeds deer and subsequently predators. Matter processes involve the cycling of materials within the system. Water, carbon, and nitrogen move repeatedly between living organisms and the physical environment. For instance, nutrients absorbed by plants are transferred to animals and later returned to the soil by decomposers. Information processes involve signals that trigger responses. Environmental changes such as rising temperature, drought, or pollution can influence organism behavior and ecosystem functioning. A temperature increase, for example, may stress plants, alter animal migration patterns, and eventually affect ecosystem productivity. Understanding these interconnected processes is essential for analyzing system stability, resilience, and sustainability within environmental systems. Systems thinking in environmental science. Systems thinking is a key concept in the IB ESS syllabus. It focuses on understanding the environment as an interconnected system, where changes in one component can influence many others over time. Rather than examining issues in isolation, systems thinking helps us see the bigger picture. Three important principles are highlighted. First, interconnections, which recognize that the atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, biosphere, and human systems are linked. Second, cause and effect relationships, where one action can trigger multiple consequences. Third, long-term impacts, emphasizing that decisions made today can affect future generations. The deforestation example demonstrates this approach. Major drivers include agricultural expansion, logging, urbanization, mining, and infrastructure development. These activities lead to forest clearing, which causes habitat loss, biodiversity decline, soil erosion, increased carbon dioxide emissions, and disruption of the water cycle. Systems thinking also highlights feedback loops. For example, fewer forests can reduce rainfall, creating drier conditions that make forest recovery more difficult. Similarly, loss of vegetation increases atmospheric carbon dioxide, contributing to warming, which can increase forest stress and wildfire risk. These are reinforcing feedback loops because they amplify change. Over time, these effects contribute to climate change, water scarcity, food insecurity, economic losses, and social challenges. By understanding these connections, Systems thinking supports better environmental management, informed policy decisions, sustainability, and greater resilience for both ecosystems and human societies. Systems thinking in environmental science. Example: urban air pollution system. Systems thinking helps us understand how environmental problems result from interconnected causes, effects, and feedbacks rather than isolated events. Urban air pollution provides a useful example. The system begins with drivers including population growth, increasing vehicle numbers, industrial development, construction activities, and rising energy demand. These drivers create pressures such as fossil fuel combustion, industrial emissions, construction dust, waste burning, and excessive energy use. These pressures lead to changes in the state of the environment, resulting in poor air quality, respiratory illnesses, damage to vegetation, reduced visibility, deterioration of buildings and infrastructure, and increased contributions to climate change through greenhouse gas emissions. Over the long term, these effects generate broader impacts, including higher healthcare costs, reduced worker productivity, ecosystem degradation, worsening climate change, and a decline in overall quality of life. Systems thinking also highlights feedback loops. A reinforcing, or vicious, cycle occurs when more vehicles create more pollution, leading to health problems and additional emissions associated with healthcare and transportation. Conversely, a balancing or virtuous cycle can develop when clean energy, urban green spaces, and pollution control measures improve air quality, enhance public health, and increase support for sustainable policies. Potential leverage points include expanding public transport, adopting clean energy technologies, increasing urban tree cover, reducing waste burning, and implementing stronger environmental regulations. The key lesson is that urban air pollution is a complex system problem. Addressing one part of the system can influence many others, making systems thinking essential for developing effective and sustainable environmental solutions. A systems approach. A systems approach is a holistic way of understanding complex ecological and societal interactions. Rather than studying individual parts separately, it focuses on how components interact within a system and influence one another over time. A system is defined by a boundary that separates it from its surroundings. Across this boundary, input flows bring energy and matter into the system. Examples include solar energy, rainfall, and natural resources. These inputs support the functioning and productivity of the system. Within the boundary are storages, sometimes called stocks, where matter or energy accumulates. Examples include water stored in lakes, carbon stored in forests, and resources stored within human settlements. Storages can increase or decrease depending on the balance between inputs and outputs. Output flows transfer matter and energy out of the system. Examples include carbon dioxide emissions, wastewater discharge, and solid waste generated by human activities. The quantity and quality of outputs often influence environmental sustainability. Another essential component is feedbacks, which are information flows that affect future system behavior. For example, increased atmospheric carbon dioxide can lead to climate warming, which may alter ecosystem productivity and future carbon storage. This systems approach can be applied to ecological systems, such as lake ecosystems, nutrient cycles, and the carbon cycle, as well as societal systems, including urban environments, food systems, and energy networks. The key message is that systems are interconnected and interdependent. Understanding inputs, outputs, storages, flows, and feedbacks helps us analyze environmental problems more effectively and develop sustainable solutions. System diagrams. System diagrams are visual tools used to represent the structure and functioning of a system. They help us identify storages, flows, inputs, outputs, and the relationships between different components. In a system diagram, Storages are usually shown as rectangular boxes. Storages represent places where energy or matter is held for a period of time. In the lake ecosystem example, the lake water, plants and algae, and fish populations are all storages because matter and energy accumulate within them. Flows are represented by arrows. The direction of each arrow shows the movement of energy or matter. For example, surface runoff and nutrients enter the lake as inputs, while evaporation, oxygen release, sediment loss, waste, decay, and fish leaving the system represent outputs. The diagram also illustrates interactions between storages. Plants and algae use nutrients and solar energy to grow, producing oxygen through photosynthesis. Fish depend on plants either directly or indirectly through food chains, demonstrating the flow of energy and matter through the ecosystem. System diagrams simplify complex environmental systems by clearly showing connections between components. In ESS, they are used to analyze ecosystems, identify pathways of energy and matter, predict changes, and understand how disturbances in one part of a system can influence the entire system. Application of skills. System diagrams are used to apply systems thinking by showing how components, storages, inputs, outputs, and flows are connected. Storages are represented by rectangular boxes, while arrows show the movement of energy or matter through the system. The first example is a forest ecosystem. Inputs such as solar energy, rainfall, and nutrients enter the system and support plant growth. Biomass in trees, dead organic matter, and soil organic matter act as storages. Processes such as respiration and decomposition transfer carbon between these storages and the atmosphere. Outputs include oxygen released during photosynthesis, carbon dioxide released through respiration and decomposition, water vapor from evapotranspiration, and nutrients lost through leaching. This demonstrates how matter cycles while energy flows through the ecosystem. The second example is an urban water system. Inputs include precipitation, imported water, and groundwater inflow. Water is stored in reservoirs, distribution networks, and households. Flows move water between these storages for domestic and industrial use. Outputs include treated wastewater, surface runoff, and water delivered to users. Processes such as evaporation and water conservation influence how the system functions. The key takeaway is that system diagrams help us visualize interactions, trace flows of energy and matter, identify feedbacks, and analyze real-world environmental and societal systems more effectively. System flows. System flows are processes that move energy or matter within or between components of a system. These flows are classified into two categories: transfers and transformations. Transfers involve a change in the location of energy or matter without changing its form or nature. For example, river water flowing downstream transfers water from one place to another. Heat moving from a warmer object to a cooler one transfers thermal energy. Similarly, nutrients carried by runoff into a lake represent the movement of matter across the landscape. In each case, the material or energy remains essentially unchanged. Transformations, in contrast, involve a change in the chemical nature, state, or energy of matter. Photosynthesis transforms carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen using solar energy. Melting ice changes water from a solid state to a liquid state. Combustion of wood transforms stored chemical energy into heat and light energy while producing carbon dioxide and water vapor. Understanding the difference between transfers and transformations is essential because both drive system functioning. Transfers connect components, while transformations create new forms of matter or energy. Together, they explain how environmental systems operate, respond to change, and maintain dynamic interactions within ecosystems and human-managed systems. Types of systems. Systems are classified according to how they exchange matter, energy, and information with their surroundings. The two main categories are open systems and closed systems. An open system exchanges matter, energy, and information across its boundary. In the example shown, sunlight enters as energy, rainfall and carbon dioxide enter as matter, while heat, water vapor, oxygen, and organic matter may leave the system. Information can also be exchanged through signals, measurements, or responses to environmental change. Most natural systems, such as forests, the water cycle, urban environments, and even the human body, are open systems because they continuously interact with their surroundings. A closed system, by contrast, does not exchange matter with its surroundings, but it can exchange energy and information. A sealed container may gain or lose heat, and observations can still be made about the system, but matter remains inside. Examples include a sealed flask, a thermos bottle, or a carefully sealed aquarium. The key difference is that open systems exchange matter, energy, and information, whereas closed systems exchange energy and information only. Earth is often considered approximately closed for matter but open for energy. Understanding these system types helps us analyze environmental interactions, resource management, and sustainability challenges more effectively. Open systems. An open system is a system that exchanges both energy and matter with its surroundings. Most natural ecosystems are open systems because they continuously interact with the environment around them. The forest ecosystem shown here is an excellent example. Inputs entering the system include sunlight, which provides energy for photosynthesis, water from precipitation, and nutrients from the soil. These inputs support plant growth, animal survival, and ecosystem productivity. As energy and matter move through the system, various processes occur. Plants convert solar energy into chemical energy through photosynthesis, animals consume plants, and decomposers break down dead organic material, recycling nutrients. These interactions allow energy and matter to flow through the ecosystem. The system also produces outputs. Oxygen released during photosynthesis enters the atmosphere, heat energy is lost during respiration and other metabolic activities, and organic matter such as leaf litter may leave the system through wind, water movement, or decomposition processes. Examples of open systems include forests, rivers, lakes, agricultural systems, cities, and human societies. The key characteristic is the continuous exchange of energy and matter across system boundaries. This exchange enables ecosystems to function, adapt to environmental changes, maintain productivity, and support life over time. An open system local ecosystem. A local ecosystem is an example of an open system because it exchanges both energy and matter with its surroundings. Understanding these exchanges helps explain how ecosystems function and maintain stability over time. Energy enters the ecosystem primarily as solar energy in the form of light and heat. Matter enters through rainfall, nutrients, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. These inputs provide the resources necessary for life processes and ecosystem productivity. Within the system boundary, producers such as plants and algae use sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and nutrients to produce organic matter through photosynthesis. Consumers, including herbivores and carnivores, obtain energy and matter by feeding on other organisms. Decomposers, such as bacteria and fungi, break down dead organisms and wastes, returning nutrients to the environment and supporting nutrient cycling. The ecosystem also generates outputs. Energy leaves as heat loss, while matter leaves as carbon dioxide, oxygen, water vapor, and organic materials such as dead leaves, seeds, and waste. These outputs demonstrate that ecosystems are continuously interacting with their surroundings. Examples of open ecosystems include forests, ponds, grasslands, coral reefs, and lakes. The key idea in this concept is that ecosystems depend on continuous inputs, outputs, and internal biological processes to maintain dynamic equilibrium and sustain life. Closed system. A closed system is defined as a system that can exchange energy with its surroundings, but does not exchange matter across its boundary. Closed systems are less common in nature, and are often used as simplified models to understand system behavior. The example shown is a closed, non-porous vessel containing water. Because the container is sealed, water cannot enter or leave the system. However, heat energy can move across the system boundary. The process begins when the water absorbs heat from its surroundings. As energy enters the system, some of the liquid water evaporates and changes into water vapor. This is a transformation involving a change of state from liquid to gas. When the vapor comes into contact with cooler surfaces inside the container, it condenses back into liquid water, releasing heat energy. The condensed water then returns to the liquid phase, and the cycle can continue. Throughout this process, energy flows in and out, but the total amount of water remains within the vessel. No matter crosses the system boundary because the container is sealed. The Earth, which is often considered approximately closed for matter but open for energy, receiving solar radiation and releasing heat to space. Understanding closed systems helps explain how system boundaries influence the movement of energy and matter. Global geochemical cycle, carbon cycle closed system. The carbon cycle is considered a closed system because the total amount of carbon on Earth remains relatively constant. Carbon is not created or destroyed on a global scale, instead, it is continuously transferred between major carbon reservoirs. The main reservoirs include the atmosphere, biosphere, oceans, terrestrial rocks, marine sediments, fossil fuels, and Earth's interior mantle. The atmosphere stores carbon mainly as carbon dioxide, while the biosphere stores carbon in plants, animals, and soil organic matter. Oceans act as the largest active carbon reservoir, holding dissolved inorganic carbon. Carbon moves between reservoirs through various processes. Photosynthesis removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and stores it in living organisms. Respiration and decomposition return carbon to the atmosphere. Carbon is exchanged between the atmosphere and oceans through air-sea gas exchange. Over much longer timescales, weathering, sedimentation, burial, subduction, and volcanic outgassing transfer carbon between rocks, sediments, and Earth's interior. Human activities, particularly the combustion of fossil fuels, accelerate the transfer of stored carbon into the atmosphere, increasing atmospheric CO2 concentrations and contributing to climate change. This example illustrates how carbon is continuously recycled through interconnected reservoirs while remaining conserved within Earth's overall system, demonstrating the characteristics of a closed system. A closed system, Biosphere 2. Biosphere 2 is a classic example used to demonstrate the concept of a closed system. Built in Arizona, USA, it was designed to test whether humans could live sustainably in a sealed ecological environment where matter is recycled internally. The system contains several interconnected storages: the atmosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, soil or lithosphere, and decomposers. A key feature of the closed boundary is that matter does not enter or leave the system, while energy, mainly sunlight and heat, can cross the boundary. Within the system, plants perform photosynthesis, using carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight to produce oxygen and organic matter. Animals and humans carry out respiration, returning carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Water continuously cycles through evaporation, condensation, transpiration, and precipitation, while decomposers break down waste and dead organisms, returning nutrients to the soil. These nutrient cycles allow matter to be reused rather than replaced. For example, a fallen leaf is decomposed by microorganisms, releasing nutrients that can be absorbed again by plants. This illustrates how closed systems depend on efficient recycling. Biosphere 2 highlights an important principle. Although matter is retained and recycled within a closed system, continuous energy input from the sun is essential for maintaining ecosystem functions and supporting life. Isolated systems. An isolated system is defined as a system that exchanges neither matter nor energy with its surroundings. This means that everything required by the system remains completely contained within its boundary, making it entirely separated from the external environment. A commonly used example is an ideal thermos flask. The thermos is designed with thick insulation, reflective surfaces, and an airtight seal to prevent both heat transfer and matter exchange. In theory, no matter enters or leaves the flask, and no energy is gained or lost. As a result, the contents remain unchanged unless internal processes occur. The diagram highlights that both matter and energy are blocked at the system boundary. In a true isolated system, the total amount of matter and energy remains constant. However, perfectly isolated systems are extremely rare in nature. Most natural systems exchange at least some energy or matter with their surroundings. Examples such as deep underground caves, deep ocean trenches, or spacecraft in deep space may behave as nearly isolated systems, but they are not completely isolated. Understanding isolated systems helps students compare them with open and closed systems and appreciate how exchanges of matter and energy influence environmental processes and ecosystem functioning. The Earth is a single integrated system. Earth is viewed as a single integrated system composed of 6 interconnected spheres: the atmosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, geosphere, biosphere, and anthroposphere. These spheres continuously interact through the flow of energy and the cycling of matter. The atmosphere contains the gases surrounding Earth and regulates weather and climate. The hydrosphere includes all water in liquid, solid, and gaseous forms and drives the global water cycle. The cryosphere consists of glaciers, ice sheets, sea ice, and snow, influencing Earth's albedo and sea level. The geosphere provides rocks, minerals, soils, and landforms that support ecosystems and human activities. The biosphere contains all living organisms, which depend on air, water, and nutrients for survival. The anthroposphere represents human societies, economies, technologies, and infrastructure that both depend on and modify natural systems. These spheres are closely linked. For example, increased fossil fuel combustion in the anthroposphere adds greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, leading to global warming. Rising temperatures can melt glaciers in the cryosphere, increase sea levels in the hydrosphere, and alter habitats in the biosphere. This demonstrates a key principle: a change in one sphere often triggers changes throughout the entire Earth system. Understanding these interactions is essential for managing environmental challenges and promoting sustainability. James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis model. James Lovelock proposed the Gaia hypothesis, which suggests that Earth functions as a single, self-regulating system where living organisms and the physical environment interact to maintain conditions suitable for life. Gaia model is viewed as a model that emphasizes interconnectedness, feedback regulation, and homeostasis. The major Earth spheres, the atmosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere, geosphere, and cryosphere, continuously exchange energy and matter. The biosphere influences atmospheric composition through photosynthesis and respiration, while the hydrosphere redistributes heat and water. The geosphere provides nutrients and landforms, and the cryosphere affects climate through ice cover and albedo. A key feature of the Gaia model is negative feedback, which promotes stability. For example, when global temperatures rise, increased evaporation can form more clouds, reflecting solar radiation and reducing warming. Similarly, higher atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations can stimulate plant growth and increase carbon uptake, helping moderate CO2 levels. Decomposition also recycles nutrients, maintaining ecosystem productivity. According to the Gaia hypothesis, life does not merely adapt to environmental conditions, it also helps regulate them. However, that human activities such as deforestation and fossil fuel combustion can disrupt these feedback mechanisms. The central idea is that Earth's spheres operate as an integrated system, where feedbacks help maintain a relatively stable and life-supporting environment over long periods. Local ecosystem, a bromeliad plant in a rainforest. A system can be studied at different scales. Here, the system is a single bromeliad plant, and the organisms and environmental factors interacting with it within a defined system boundary. The bromeliad functions as a producer, using solar energy, carbon dioxide, water, and mineral nutrients for photosynthesis. Rainfall collects in the plant's central water tank, creating a small aquatic habitat. This stored water supports insects, spiders, frogs, and other animals that use the bromeliad for food, shelter, and breeding. Microorganisms, including bacteria and fungi, decompose dead leaves, insects, and other organic matter, recycling nutrients back into the system. Abiotic inputs include sunlight, rainfall, dissolved minerals, and atmospheric gases, while outputs include heat loss and excess water leaving through overflow or evaporation. This example demonstrates that even a very small ecosystem contains biotic and abiotic components, inputs, outputs, storages, flows, and nutrient cycling. Understanding these local interactions helps explain how larger rainforest ecosystems function, highlighting the principle that systems operate across multiple scales and remain interconnected through continuous flows of energy and matter. A large ecosystem, rainforest. A rainforest is an example of a large open ecosystem where energy and matter continuously flow across a defined system boundary. It contains both biotic components, such as plants, animals, and decomposers, and abiotic components, including soil, water, air, minerals, and temperature. The system receives important inputs. Solar energy drives photosynthesis, rainfall supplies water and dissolved nutrients, atmospheric gases support photosynthesis and respiration, and organic inputs such as leaf litter contribute nutrients. Within the ecosystem, producers convert solar energy into organic matter, consumers obtain energy by feeding on plants or other animals, and decomposers break down dead organic material, returning nutrients to the soil through nutrient cycling. The rainforest also produces outputs, including water released through evapotranspiration and runoff, gases such as carbon dioxide and water vapor, organic matter such as seeds and fallen leaves, and heat loss to the surroundings. For example, tropical rainforests play a major role in the global carbon cycle by absorbing atmospheric carbon dioxide and storing carbon in biomass. This demonstrates that rainforests are highly interconnected systems where energy flows, matter cycles, and interactions between living and non-living components maintain biodiversity, climate regulation, and ecosystem stability. A global system, atmospheric circulation. Atmospheric circulation is an example of a global open system that redistributes energy and matter around the Earth. It is driven primarily by uneven solar heating and the Earth's rotation, which create pressure differences and global wind patterns. The system receives inputs including solar energy, atmospheric gases, water vapor from evaporation, and aerosols from natural events such as volcanic eruptions and human activities. At the equator, intense solar heating causes warm air to rise, creating a zone of low pressure and heavy rainfall. As air moves poleward, it cools and sinks around 30 degrees latitude, forming subtropical high-pressure zones. These movements create the Hadley, Ferrel, and polar cells, along with major wind systems such as the trade winds, westerlies, and polar easterlies. The system produces important outputs, including precipitation, heat transfer from tropical to polar regions, redistribution of greenhouse gases, and transport of aerosols. For example, atmospheric circulation helps carry heat from the equator toward higher latitudes, moderating climate and influencing weather patterns such as monsoons and storm systems. This illustrates how a global system links the atmosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, and cryosphere through continuous flows of energy and matter, regulating climate and supporting life on Earth.